So problem 4, it says 3/50th of the country's budget comes from tourism. So what would this look like as a percent? So we're going to change it to a percent. How do you change a fraction to a percent or a decimal to a percent? Just multiply with 100%. Remember that 100% is equal to a 1. 50 goes 2 times into 100, and that makes it a 6%. So this 3/50th of the country's budget comes from tourism is the same as saying 6% of the country's budget comes from tourism. In Georgia in 2005, almost 1/5 of the residents are not covered by health insurance. What does that look like as a percent? 1/5 has to now be converted to a percent. And what is the process? We multiply with 100%. So 5 goes 20 times into 100. So that would be the same as saying 20% of Georgia's residents are not covered by insurance. Which number represents a 60%? Now 60% can be written as a fraction or a decimal. So let's write it both ways. If I want to write it as a fraction or a decimal, my first step is to write it as 60 over 100. Now from this point on, I can change it to a fraction or a decimal. 60 over 100, if I want to write it as a fraction, I cancel the zeros, which is like canceling tens, and then 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 times 5 is 10. The 2's cancel, and if I convert 60% to a fraction, I get 3/5. Now if I convert 60% to a decimal, all I have to do is, if I cancel the zeros, shift the decimal point, which is here right now, to the left, because it's division, by 1 place value. So it's equal to 0.6. So converting 60% to a decimal gives us 0.6. Now let's see what 6.0 looks like. 6.0, if I want to change it to a percent, I'll have to multiply with 100%, which is the same as 600%, which means it's 6 times the original quantity or the reference quantity. Now 0.60% is the same as 0.60 per 100. So when I divide by 100, I shift the decimal point 2 places to the left, which gives me 0.0060. Now you can see why the first two are not the same as 60%. And again, we have a comparison of a fraction and a percent. You can never compare the two unless you've converted both to fractions or both to percents. Let's do it both ways. Half, if I convert it to a percent, I'd have to multiply with 100%. 2 goes 50 times into 100, and that's the same as 50%. Now 50% and 0.5% are very different. Half is the same as 50%. 0.5% is a tiny quantity. Now the other way we could do the exact same problem is to change 0.5% to a fraction. 0.5% is half divided by 100. Percent means divide by 100. 100 is 100 over 1. It's 1 over 2 times, I flip the fraction, 1 over 100, and that is equal to 1 over 200. Now let's compare the fractions, 1/2 and 1 over 200. 1 part out of 200 is a tiny quantity as compared to 1 out of 2 parts, which is half of the whole. Now in this section, let's just think quickly about what we've done in the previous section and this section. So in the previous section, we started with percents and we converted the percents to fractions and to decimals. And either way, we first change the percent to a fraction. Let's say we have a 5%. We go 5 per 100. And from this point, we can go either way. We can write it as a fraction by reducing it, or we can write it as a decimal by shifting the decimal point 2 places to the left. In the second section, 6.2, we started off with a fraction or a decimal, and we converted it to a percent. And what was the first step always? Whatever the number is, whether it's a decimal or fraction, let's say it's a 2/5, then we multiply by 100%, which is not changing the value. 100% is a 1, and then writing it as a percent. If it's given as a decimal, let's say 0.20 is the decimal number. How do we change it to a percent? We multiply it by 100%, which is the same as shifting the decimal point 2 place values to the right and writing it as 20%. So this is 6.1 and this is 6.2. Just remember these techniques. Changing a percent to a fraction or a decimal. Get rid of the percent. Percent is the same as divide by 100. If I want to change a fraction or a decimal, and remember we don't start with a percent, we start with a fraction or a decimal. To change it to a percent, we have to multiply by 100% and simplify.